Welcome to Better Sex, where you get the information and inspiration to create and enjoy your best possible sex life. Join your host, sex therapist Jessa Zimmerman, as she brings you expert guests, helpful tips, knowledge, and strategies to improve your intimate relationships. And now, your host, Jessa Zimmerman.
Hi, it's Jessa. Welcome back to the Better Sex Podcast. I am so glad that you're here. I'm really, truly appreciative for every person that tunes in and listens and chooses to spend some time with me in the show. You know, mostly this is a one-way kind of exercise. You know, I record these, I put them out, and you listen. It's hard to have a lot of interaction with you, but I still appreciate you. And, you know, this is interesting because we've got a confluence of things happening today. I, for the very first time, am offering some free teaching webinars, and they start tomorrow. And this is the first podcast episode I've done where it's more like a collegial chat. So I'm not interviewing Corey as much as we are discussing our ideas about sexual desire and desire discrepancy. And that's the topic of these webinars that start tomorrow. So it all kind of comes together. So you're going to get to hear two peers talking about desire discrepancy and some of the strategies about that. And then you have the opportunity, if you have not yet signed up, to partake in my free webinars about desire discrepancy, the traps that I think people fall into with it, and the strategies that you can use to navigate this with your partner. Because a truth is that in every relationship, one person wants more sex than the other. That's just the way it is, at least over time. Nothing is broken with that. Nothing is wrong, but it frequently causes trouble. People get into conflict about it, get into stress about it, start to become polarized in it, and then fall into, you know, again, what I call these traps. So that's the topic of the webinars that start tomorrow and what Corey and I are going to talk about in this episode of Better Sex. So he is a therapist and a podcaster. I think he's down in Texas. I was on his podcast at one point, and we had the idea, let's do this show and just talk like two peers over coffee, talking about how we deal with desire discrepancy with our clients. So I hope you enjoy the show. Corey, thank you so much for being on the show with me today.
Absolutely. I've been looking forward to this. This will be fun.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to sort of, in some ways, building on the conversation we had when I was on your show. So,
right.
Yeah. So the topic today is desire discrepancy. This shows up in, well, I guess it shows up in really all my couples, but Yep. It shows up as an item of concern in, I don't know, 2/3? Would you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have a similar bent. So I see it in all of my couples, just mainly because I bring it up and present it that way.
Right.
I don't know if I was trying to think of how many of my couples that come in that have already thought of it in that frame. You know, it's less than 2/3, but maybe not by much.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know that people have the language of desire discrepancy, or they may not have the concept, but they're certainly aware that, you know, they're fighting over the frequency of sex, or they're not having it often, or it's, you know, I've given up trying because my partner always turns me down, or, you know, they're struggling with it. They may not understand the concept. Yeah. Right.
No. And to me, it's just, I love the idea of trying to frame it through the differences rather than right or wrong, which that's been the most powerful thing to me. If you're talking about desire discrepancy, is higher or lower, neither one are right or wrong. They're just points. Right?
Yeah. That it's a system, right? And we should point out, you know, for listeners, there's always, at least over time, somebody wants more sex than the other person, right? Mm-hmm. It's just higher or lower. And you're so right, because I'm always trying to make a point that there isn't a right amount of desire.
Right.
It's not like somebody's better or worse. I mean, I know that, you know, in my practice, most people come in assuming that the lower desire partner is the one that's broken. Mm-hmm. They're the one that's, you know, something's wrong. Why don't they just have libido? You know, and they both tend to come in thinking that way, as opposed to realizing there isn't it's not like one person's healthy and the other one isn't.
Right. That's the thing I've loved. And some of my audience has even gotten upset about me saying this too much.
Oh, really?
Early in the years of Sexy Marriage Radio, I took the Schnarch phrase of, sometimes the lower desire partner might have the clearest judgment because the sex you're having isn't really worth wanting.
Right.
So you have to question, why does the higher desire want multiple helpings of lousy sex?
Yeah.
And that's a good way to kind of shake up a system to start looking at, wait, what is this really? Is what we're doing worth it for both?
Yeah.
And, or are you settling, or are you giving up on something, or are you not showing up for something because you're afraid of rejection or performance or being seen or being found out, or, all the things that happen if you talk about marriage in a sophisticated lens of, it really does require us to be more than we are a lot of times.
So you were hearing from listeners that were upset with this idea?
Well, I would have people that my high desires would email in and they would say, don't tell me that the sex we're having isn't worth wanting, because it is. And I'm are you sure? Because you're being kind of defensive on this. So maybe you're not being real open about the possibility that it's not.
Right. Well, and even if the hires, is that what you call them? My high desires, feel like the sex is worth wanting, they have to question whether the lower desire partner feels that way too. I mean, because when I'm working with couples, I'm always starting with the premise that the lower desire partner has some good reasons for not wanting to get involved, right? Whether those are relationship dynamics or the meaning of the sex or the sex itself. Like, there's always something to point out to the higher desire people about, have you wondered what's going on with your partner? Maybe they're not just broken, maybe. Have you asked, like, what's really happening for them and what do they need or want, or what,
And are you willing to do that?
Yeah. And then do something about it. Right.
Right. Because I think there's lots of times, I just got off a call right before hopping on here with you to record with a couple that he plays the role of the higher desire, but she's questioning that because she realized she was like actively repressing some of her desire. And through some of the stuff she's been working on, realized, no, I have a lot of times where she's written down, kind of kept a log, and she's like, no, I have a lot of times where I'm interested. I'm just not with him right now because he's not connecting with me. He's not doing these things to create it. And so just that lens and that language helps each of them call each other out and call themselves out.
Yeah.
And really start to examine, is what's going on real, and is it true, and am I living according to my character and my integrity? Because I went after him in the session of, hey, what gives? If you say you want more sex with her, but you are constantly busy and avoiding it, what does that say?
Yeah.
And there's that makes hard answers that we have to start finding.
Right. But people aren't going to get out of this without asking those hard questions and really confronting themselves. I mean, at least when they really, by the time they come see us, right? People can be pretty entrenched with this.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then it starts to then you start getting into the deeper revealing of, okay, what do I really want? What am I really doing? How often do I just settle?
Yeah.
For the path of least resistance, which that seems to be kind of human nature.
Right.
And, in some regards, I think we're all like water. we find the easiest path to go downhill. But there's times where, man, if I want something of real value and I want something of real meaning, then it requires, I got to confront some things, not just my partner. I got to confront myself on a lot of these things and realize, how am I shooting myself in the foot, but been pretty cruel in the way I've blamed my partner.
Yeah. It is interesting how much we're willing to pathologize each other.
Yep.
And again, I see that, whether the higher desire partner is looking at their partner and saying, what's wrong with you? Where's your libido? You must be broken. Let's go into sex therapy so the person can fix you, right? That's pretty common.
Absolutely.
But the lower desire partners often pathologize the higher desire one, right? It's like you think about is sex, maybe even you're a sex addict, or, what's wrong with you that you're on the other end of the spectrum?
Sure. Because I have a biblical framework of life in a sense that I believe that even when Adam and Eve in sin entered the world, they blamed each other No, it wasn't.
Started way back, huh?
Yeah, it wasn't my fault. It was the woman you put me here with, which is never a good move for a man to blame a woman for that. And then she blamed the serpent, and how dare you, kind of a thing. So it's just it seems like one of the things we just do in married life, and I think this is where we kind of have a lot of kindred spiritness to it, is you can't get out of avoiding your own hit in life. You've got to confront you better with what's going on, and then you get a chance to create room for your partner and take that curious stance like you framed of what could be going on with them. What is it that makes them be their point on the continuum of either I would like a lot of this or I would like little of this. And they have reasons for it, and I think they're valid. And it's just, if I can understand them, maybe we start collaborating better to get them.
Right. So when you think about how desire discrepancy shows up in your practice, like what kind of defines the struggles that people have around that, right? Like, how does a higher desire partner come in feeling? How does a lower desire partner feel? Like, how does it show up for people?
Well, I mean, it's, if you're talking about it just in the arena of sex, then most of the time the ones I get, they've shown up because they're just frustrated of being rejected. They're frustrated of being pushed down the order of priority. They're frustrated of just everything. Or the other end of the spectrum with the lower desire is they're tired of always being on guard and always being the gatekeeper of it. And it's like, and that's where I think they can easily take that stance of all you ever think about is this, because that's all that's ever brought to them.
Yeah.
And this has been an interesting shift just recently in my thinking from some other conversations I've had with some other colleagues just recently, of that there's a lot of times where I've gone after men a lot, because in general, you can stereotype it, higher desire is the man, lower desire is the woman, even though it's probably 60-40, 70-30, reverse that, right? I don't know if that's in yours, but
I tend to think in heterosexual couples, because I do see same-sex couples too, and this still holds true for them.
Sure, absolutely.
It seems more like 50-50, but maybe it's 60-40. But
okay, and it's not as off balance as we can easily stereotypically make. Right. So it's just to be clarifying of that.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because I'd have men that, one of the things I've been doing with Sexy Marriage Radio is trying to just help husbands recognize when you get rejected, absorb a rejection better. Don't pout. Don't get angry, because that is not appealing. That's not helping your game in the long run at all.
Right.
If you turn into a pouty toddler, how in the world is a wife going to get turned on by that?
Right.
Like, come on, seriously? Your penis got rejected, and now all of a sudden you are throwing a fit? Come on, But it's recognizing there's even more to that needs to be talked about. Of, it's not just don't pout and don't get angry, but if I'm coming at my wife, and I'll personalize it, if I'm coming at my wife for sex and she's not interested because she's a lower desire and whatever's going on, she's just not in that spot, and I'm using one of my rationale as to why I'm interested in sex with her is for that connection.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the ones the higher desire will use as a leverage a lot. Well, I just really want to connect with you.
Right.
And she says no. And I say, okay. And I go off and then go watch TV or read or do something different that's not connecting with her. Am I really trying to connect with her?
Yeah. Very good point.
Right?
I do ask people, what is it you're trying to get when you want to have sex?
Yep.
Because if it's just an orgasm, you can do that, right?
Yep.
You can get it. You can have as many orgasms as you want. So what's really at stake here? What are you looking for?
Right. And so I love the language of looking at it deeper with the meanings that you're talking about, with the higher desire, lower desire, meanings of everything, and start then challenging myself on, okay, if I say I want connection and she's not interested in that means of connection, well, then what means is she interested in that moment? And if that's what I'm wanting, then I have to figure out how do I adjust some to create that, or at least be honest, because I think it's a whole different ballgame if I was to say, hey, I'm just really interested in sex with you tonight. Because really, why? Just because I really want some sex with you tonight. I'm not interested. Okay, then I'm going to go watch the game, and it's because I'm not trying to say I'm looking to connect then.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's a little further, but I do point out to people, you don't need to take this as rejection either, right? Like I really do try to even take on that language and that mindset about if somebody's taking care of themselves and saying, no, that's not a rejection of you.
Right.
Your offer maybe got rejected, but it's, so often that higher desire partner is taking this personally as if it is rejection, or I'm not desirable, or I'm not sexy, or I'm not important, as opposed to somebody just doesn't want what you want right in that moment. So,
well, because sometimes, and this is the joke thing I use when I'm speaking on this subject and trying to unpack it, is I try to at least offer up the alternative that sometimes the lower desire's rejection is good judgment.
Yes,
because when I make a pass at my wife in the aisle at Target, her saying no is good judgment at that moment, right? So, but it's just kind of seeing it as, okay, this is all a language, and how do I depersonalize it a little bit?
Yeah.
So I could then in turn be more personal with what does happen.
Yeah.
Because I also love the framework of, in a committed relationship. I mean, I deal with and put it all under the umbrella of marriage, but it's all under a committed relationship. I love the idea that sex is a long game. Right? That just because I do something, initiate, and maybe don't have success with it, then that doesn't mean it doesn't pay off in the long run.
Yeah.
I'm playing the role of the higher desire better because the predominance of initiation is on the higher desire most of the time.
Right.
That's why they're the higher desire.
Right.
That's part of the role. And, I hear couples a lot, when back to your question of how do I see it play out, I hear a lot of the whole higher desire complaining, I just wish that the lower desire would initiate. It's like, well, why would they? They're not interested,
Yeah, or at least they're not thinking about it right now, and you are. So it's, you're right. I hear that a lot. Like I do all the initiating is one of the big complaints.
Right. And so I start trying to challenge that to realize, well, one, that comes to the territory of being the higher desire.
Yeah.
But the other is it's a long game. So play your role well.
Yeah.
And then frame it differently from initiation rejection to initiation response or initiation reaction.
Yeah.
Because I could have times as the higher desire where I have initiated, it doesn't culminate in what I wanted, but I got a good response, at least, of there was a banter, there was an interchange, there was a frivolity of some sort, a little flirty something. That's still good.
Right.
In the whole scheme of things, that's a good thing.
Yeah. And you still might get that connection like you're talking about, even if it wasn't sexual in that moment, it's still building towards.
And you're setting up a framework for that being interwoven throughout the entirety of the relationship, not just moments on a radar screen that blip every so often. But you can have this interchange of seeing it as, I challenge, this is one of the things I did just in my own journey as the higher desire is, starting to see it as, okay, this wasn't about initiation and then rejection, because that's most of the time higher desires get frustrated because they're just tired of being rejected. And I get that. I feel that. But instead I changed it to, okay, it wasn't about initially it wasn't about how my wife responded or not. It was about, did I initiate or not? That's what created success for me. Okay. Did I say what was on my mind or not?
Right.
Did I go in for a kiss or not? And if I could start framing it as, wait, I could be proud that I started living more who I was, I am.
Aligned with your desire.
Right.
Yeah.
Rather than it all being contingent on, is it met or not?
Yeah.
That shifted the power structure back to my own shoulders better.
Right.
And it started utilizing the pressure of the relationship better.
Yeah.
In the sense that now my job is just to present something worth wanting to be with, worth wanting to have sex with, worth wanting to engage with. And the more I do that, if she continues to reject that, I've got more I can really we can talk about then.
Right.
Then we do go seek help. Right?
Yeah.
I'm like, hold on. We don't really like each other. We need to figure out what's going on. Or in most cases, and I don't know if this is your experience and how it bears out, but in most cases, once you kind of get the power dynamic back in order a little bit, the system works itself out pretty good because you're both playing roles better in the system.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. And I think, you're talking about how the higher desire partner feels rejected and can get pouty like a toddler, right? And then on the flip side of that, for the lower desire partner, right, they feel so much pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like they can get caught in a trap of only responding to that pressure, like digging
Right.
in and getting, almost oppositional,
Yeah.
sometimes. It gets so polarized in the
Right.
relationship like that. So both people playing those roles better, I think, goes a long way. And
Right.
and
And
part
I
of
think,
what we talked about on your episode, like you asked me, how do I challenge lower desire partners? Like what's the call to them? And to me, they have some good reasons for not
mm-hmm,
wanting the sex, right?
mm-hmm,
Some valid reasons, but I think sometimes they're indulging themselves sitting in their comfort zone,
okay.
and not willing to be more actively engaged in speaking up about what it is that would, about those reasons they have, what would make it more engaging, what do they need, being
Right.
like an active creator of a sex life that they could embrace.
Right.
And it's not across the board, but I think that's a tendency of people that are struggling. It's like they just have resigned. It's like all the desires on the other side, and the other person, it's their job. And I
So in
really,
essence, the picture just came to my head, Jessa, of in essence, it's rather than the toddler that's throwing the big fit because they didn't get their way, it's the toddler that's digging their heels in because they don't want to shift, they don't want to go, they don't want to change. Because everybody that's been a parent knows that time where your kid's having fun and it's like, no, it's time to go, and they dig their heels in and are like, no, you're not
yeah.
making me. And in essence, but no, what
Right,
we have
right,
could
right.
be
Or the
better for
the
you.
toddler, you can't get in the car seat, right? They're rigid.
Exactly. It's like, you're not going to force me. And so in essence, I mean, this still just rings true that in a lot of ways, human beings are just sophisticated toddlers,
Yeah, yeah.
as adults.
Right, right. We have that tendency anyway. But yeah, to me, it's like this thing that when people are struggling with this, a higher desire partner is left with so much of the ownership of the problem and the
Right.
struggle. Both people I think are struggling, and it's really, really hard. But I like to see the lower desire partner really take some responsibility because, they do have the spigot, right?
Yep.
They
They
do have
do.
the control, not because they want it, but
They
because they
do.
want it less. And it could be so easy to sit, if I were the lower desire partner, to sit totally where I'm comfortable. And I just say
Absolutely.
no all the time, unless it's exactly what I want in that moment. It's really not fair to my partner who wants more of something to not meet them. And I'm not talking about averaging numbers, but I'm
Right.
being a collaborator, in a sex life that both people can find fulfilling.
Yeah, because then I think one of the things that helps with the higher desire, lower desire in my world, that this seems kind of ironic, is to a path forward in a marriage, in a relationship that's sexual, is it's not the higher desire as much as frequency. When you start looking at it, it's higher in desire and lower desire, which are a lot closer probably on quality,
Mm-hmm.
right? That it's that where you're both having sex that you would both want,
Yeah.
right? I think the ultimate definition of what is great sex is both people really seeking what they want and at the same time seeking to give their partner what they want.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. That you're both collaborators and
Right.
instigators in that. And it's a fluid dance, and it's, there's a whole lot of just follow the connection kind of stuff that happens.
Right.
And that's both people have shown up for it.
Yeah.
And too often, we get into, well, I'll settle for what I can get, or I'll give what I can get them off my back, or,
Yeah. Yeah. I know. And it's I say this too, like if we're talking about frequency, like how many times a week or a month, it's like, that's such the wrong conversation.
right.
That is, I know that if people are talking like that, like quotas and, counting, they're not addressing those quality issues that are going to, feel really fulfilling no matter how often they're having sex.
Right. Because if you can have, and I would assume this probably rings true for most everybody listening, but if you can have good quality sex, the number doesn't matter as much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the quality lasts longer. It's kind of like that whole wow, I can relive that in my mind for a little bit longer than just the functional lay I had.
Yeah, or it's like a highly nutritious meal versus junk food,
Yep.
like the junk food just leaves you hungry again because you're not really getting what you need.
Right. And then you start recognizing and shift it out of the realm of sex. And then you're just talking about experiencing the essence of people. And,
right.
And the connection and the depth of emotion and mental. And, there's a whole lot more than it's, we're not just talking sex.
Right. Not mechanical.
Holistic.
Yeah. Hey, it's Jess. I'm just taking a little bit of a break in the middle of the show because I want to tell you more about my first round of teaching webinars that I'm doing all about navigating desire discrepancy. So this is almost universal in the clients that I work with. They're struggling with the fact that one of them wants more sex than the other. And of course, the reality is that is always true, and you don't always have to struggle with it, but it's really, really common. So I'm hosting a webinar. It is totally free to go over the 4 mistakes people make that get them stuck in these dynamics that are so problematic. I would love to have you join me. All you have to do is go to bettersexpodcast.com/webinar. You can get signed up. Again, totally free. Got a couple different choices of times. I hope you'll join me for that. And I know that with like lower desire partners too, I have this conversation about, I'm not trying to get you to have more sex.
Right.
I'm trying to help you want sex, right? It's not about, because I think they can feel so defensive as if I'm going to have some role in making them do something they don't want. And it's like, no, the whole point of this is to help you to access as much desire as you have. What's in the way of that?
Right.
What can augment that?
Right.
It's about you wanting it.
Yeah. And I think you can add the same caveat. I've done this with some of the couples I've worked with of, I want to at least get you to the point as a lower desire that if you don't want sex, you can be honest with your spouse about that.
Yeah.
And it's coming from a good integrity stance so that they can make informed decisions about what do they want.
Yeah.
Because then you're not holding each other hostage with I'm going to, I know I want to. And it's all that I just don't want you to leave. And so I'm going to do the littlest I have to so that you don't.
Right.
And that's just holding each other hostage.
Yeah.
And it largely comes down to how far am I willing to take it?
Yeah.
How far am I willing to take what I want? And am I willing to confront that risk that will be associated with it and to get the possibility of getting what I want? Because to get what I really want in marriage, especially in sex, there has to be choice.
Yeah.
Obligation never brings about fulfilling sex.
Right. Now, is this something you talk about with clients? I mean, I imagine it is one way or another, but it's something that I call maybe, because so many, it's not like 100% aligned, but a lot of the lower desire partners also have more reactive or responsive desire. Like they don't feel spontaneously aroused or horny or interested in sex, right? So they have a desire that has to be evoked, which means you have to go into somewhat of a sexual encounter and start and see if the engine turns over.
Right.
And it requires both people understanding that first of all, that's a thing that's valid, right?
Absolutely.
And it takes an openness to go in and start without either person expecting this has to necessarily go all the way, right? Like that to me is such a big part of solving desire discrepancy is understanding that reactive desire and then acting accordingly, and then of course both people have to be okay if it doesn't happen that time. It's not like they both have to be able to adjust and handle whatever the outcome might be. Right.
But I love that same kind of framework of just that there's somebody that has more of a quote unquote biological drive possibly. Yeah. And usually that's, if you go just straight biology, this testosterone in your system generally creates a little more horniness than less testosterone in your system is going to. And that's male or female. But it also can be environmental and situational and visual, whatever it is the wiring is.
Right. And stresses. I mean, all kinds of things can affect that.
But typically speaking, the lower desire probably is more responsive than instigating when it comes to sex because they just don't have the biological drive or desire or it's on their thought process. It's just not there. But right circumstance, right initiation, yeah, they can be responsive real quick. I mean, I've had a lot of people that it took a while to kind of land on the framework of it, but the idea of, well, I don't have any libido, and it's like,
Right.
well, hold on, maybe you don't have a libido, but you still are interested in sex when it's going.
Right.
Right?
Right. So
And
that's,
it's
you may not
great
have
and
this.
satisfying and
Right.
great experience for both of you.
Yeah.
But it's just, you don't have a libido in the libido sense of, I don't think about sex during the week. Well, okay. There's a lot of people that don't.
Yeah. 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 And I feel like that, so many people avoid it because I'm not in the mood right now.
Mm-hmm.
So no, and they don't feel safe maybe to explore, wait, if we got going, maybe it would happen. But then,
Right.
then I feel like I've started something I can't finish, or, they
Right.
have to collaborate on that too, that it's safe to sort of explore that.
Yeah.
And try and start and then be happy with whatever happens, whether it turns into, sex or not.
And sometimes just helping lower desires have a language for that.
Yeah.
Is huge, because
Yeah.
there's a big, just even changing the no response to something more along the lines of, I'm not right now, but I could possibly be later.
Yeah.
Or could possibly be as we get going, or, kind of create an alternative. Because to me, as a higher desire, when my wife shifted some of her verbiage years ago from no to no, but I could maybe be encouraged, that turns into, as a guy, that's a challenge. Then all of a sudden it's like, oh, challenge accepted, babe. Let's go. Because then it changes the whole connotation.
Yeah. Although personally, I don't want that to be the higher desire partner's job and challenge to somehow, if like for it to all be on that person to magically seduce the other one. Like,
you're absolutely correct.
I still want that to be a collaboration. Like,
Absolutely.
I wasn't thinking about sex, but maybe I could, but I need, if I were lower desire, I need to have some input in what would most,
right.
like an active person even in that. But I need massage first, or we got to talk about this other thing that's bugging me. And then maybe, or,
I like that. I mean, I think that's because you can't let either side off the hook.
Yeah.
You can't put it all on one person either, because that doesn't make good encounters either.
Right.
But it's still just, because one of the things that can be beneficial in my experience is, okay, look at the dynamic of how this plays out in your own relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you shut it down? Right? Because sometimes I shut it down just by my verbiage, by my response, by the situation. I mean, we can even get so sophisticated. I know you've probably seen this, of the lower desire who's constantly being bombarded that they never initiate. And so in a blue moon, they initiate, but it's always in an impossible time. Sex could not possibly occur. It's right when the higher desire is going to sleep.
Yeah.
Just about in, REM sleep. And they reach over and start sex, and the higher desire says no. And now all of a sudden they're like, I get credit for starting something, even though I knew it wouldn't happen, And if you look at it, that's us as humans, right? That it's like, how do I get out of this label so I still feel good about myself, even though I know exactly what I'm doing isn't good? And so if I could just figure out my system of how do I shut it down? How do I avoid it? And challenge that. And just go, you know what? I'm going to try to be more available. I'm going to try to be more forthcoming about, here's what I think might help.
Yeah.
I would love to try this, or that's a monumental shift.
Yes, it is.
In a relationship.
Yeah. And I can think about couples that I've met with, well, it's Monday, last week, talking about, finally speaking up about, you go too fast for me. Or I don't like when you do this particular thing, or I need some more time, or, we got to get a lock on the door, or, I believe the lower desire partners have a lot of information about what they need if they examine. Yes. And if they can start to speak up about that and claim it, all of a sudden they've got some more space,
But that takes some serious courage sometimes.
Yeah.
They have to start confronting their comfort zone.
Right. Well, their own comfort zone for sure. And sometimes the response they've gotten from their partner. Like, I'll have them say, would it really be okay for me to start and then not want sex? And the partner will say, well, yeah, but, maybe not. Historically, that hasn't gone well, right? They've got reasons to be afraid of that.
Yep. And then there's even the dynamic I've seen that the lower desire has initiated throughout the course of their relationship and been shot down
Yeah.
because the higher desire doesn't like being on the responsive side.
Huh.
They like being the initiator, the instigator, because the responder is too threatening
Yeah.
to them. It's emasculating. It's,
Right.
I think of it, I use the phraseology of captain and first officer a lot of times in marriage.
Huh. Okay.
I've come across a lot of times where wives that are moms, for sure, they would much rather be first officer, not captain.
Because they're sort of captain in regular life all the time, right?
Well, they don't want to be the goes down with the ship. They don't want to be the one that has to make every single decision. They want somebody in there that will make the hard decisions, that will speak up and not be dictator.
Right.
Captains aren't dictators.
Yeah.
They just kind of set a tone. They chart a path in a sense.
Yeah.
This is what we're about. This is the bigger story. This is our mission. That kind of stuff. And a lot of husbands I have come across in a lot of the Christian world I work in, a lot of husbands, they're absent in the captain chair.
Huh.
And the wife gets really frustrated because if you're not a captain to a first officer, you're just one of the crew.
Yeah.
Which means you're one of the children.
Right.
And that's not appealing to a wife.
Right.
And so there's an element of captain just needs to be a good captain. First officer needs to be good first officer. Both of you play your roles really well. And one of the things I have found in sex is captains, which in this regard, men, don't like being out captained sometimes because it's too threatening of their own masculinity and the way they define themselves.
Yeah.
Of, wow, I don't know if I can respond. It's a threat. And there's a whole lot of other things revealed rather than this is just, I'm not interested in sex. There's a whole lot more inadequacy or uncertainty or they're coming to play. And then you had all of that to the mix. No wonder this whole thing gets complicated with desire issues. And it's so much easier just to fight about, well, there's something broken in you.
Right.
It's self-fixed and we'll be fine.
Yeah. That's also making me think about people I've helped where I'm thinking of heterosexual relationships where the guy has had almost no experience and the woman has.
Yep.
And how much pressure there is on him, and how much they can avoid sex. And, they're supposed to be this captain. I haven't used that language, but this expectation for the guy to know what he's doing and to be the leader. And he's so intimidated maybe by the woman's sexuality or her experience or his own lack. And what a conundrum that becomes,
Well, and I mean, so the world we're in, especially here in the West, in the United States area, the civilized world, I guess you could say, has made it such a male-centric thing when it comes to sex.
Yeah.
It's all about a penis and just pounding away, and that's going to provide pleasure. And no, it's not, porn is not at all accurate on what it is. But the flip side of that, not only does that do tremendous skewing to women and what women's role and who they are, and there's so much more than that. It does a tremendous skewing to men.
Yes.
Because there's this element of, as a man, if I can't perform or last or sustain or whatever with a woman who can have endless orgasms without the refractory period, and I can only have one, and then I'm going to have a little time to recover. And if I can't, can I still engage in the situation for her pleasure? And, there's so much that we find our own thresholds of incapacity, or insecurity, that is all of that kind of stuff. If you can really drill down, I think you start to get the sophistication of, okay, there's a whole lot more at play than just sex.
Right.
That this is an essence of us being challenged, being revealed, being discovered, being seen. Because, you get the scenario of the virgin man versus the experienced woman. Well, if they don't have some honest conversations ahead of time of like, look, I don't really know what I'm getting into here.
Yeah.
I'm kind of scared, that's actually a strength move in my mind.
Absolutely.
Because I'm owning that more than trying to hide and act like it's not there.
Right. And then make up reasons why you don't want sex or, whatever the avoidance trap is. Yeah.
Right. And that's not a good way to go through life because that gets discovered so easily.
Right. That's true. You can't hide that one forever.
No, you can't. I mean, you can't hide anything in a committed relationship because you live in too close proximity to each other.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, all this goes to, it just makes me again appreciate how complicated and nuanced this is, right? Like every couple, there are themes that we're talking about, but each couple really needs to examine what exactly is happening with you and your partner. And then what can you take on about yourself? Like every situation's co-created. So how are you going to identify and address your part?
Right. Because I love that the phraseology. My wife's actually the one that kind of nailed this down for me of what is this experience revealing about me?
Yeah.
Because that's the question I need to be asking. It's not what's wrong with my spouse and how do I fix it? How do we go get them something so it makes it easier for me? No, it's what could be going on here that's revealing about me.
Yeah.
Where am I coming up against a part of me that's just not quite as evolved as I thought it would be, or not even born yet as a capacity?
Yeah.
Because if you look at it, we all are better as life has gone on. In some regards, we've all become something.
Yeah.
And that's a tremendous strength and tremendous process. But how do I continue to see that through my entirety of life?
Yeah. Yeah. Anything else we haven't touched on as you think about desire discrepancy?
Well, I don't know if there's not enough in there for people to chew on. Man, there's so much more than just sex going on here.
I know. I'm imagining people listening and sort of like, like you said, chewing on this and being like, holy cow, this is, complicated and big.
Because I think this plays out in every arena. I think this plays out in how we initiate or not. Yeah. This plays out in how we have a conversation or not. How do I start to at least look at it through the lens of what is this about me? What role am I playing? And am I playing it to my best?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's all I can really control in the end of the thing anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. So would you say just a word about your podcast and where people can find out more about you, kinds of things you're offering?
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So I have a show comes out every Wednesday, Sexy Marriage Radio. Everything can be found at sexymarriage.net. The show is, it's over 7 years old now. We're coming up on episode 400.
Wow.
And it is, the whole premise is the best sex happens in the marriage bed. Because we want to take a healthy and straightforward, honest look at married sex through the lens of being pro-relationship.
Yeah.
That the whole goal is, if it's not working, don't just leave and go find another one. See if there's something else there's something else at play. And let's keep looking, because we want to honor marriage and all that it can be, because I think when our relationships are better, our country's better.
I agree. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. And
Absolutely.
I will put those links too in the show notes, so people don't have to write that down while they're driving or something. They can find
Safety first. Yes.
Exactly. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Better Sex. Please visit our website, bettersexpodcast.com, for show notes and additional episodes.
And that's a wrap for today. I really hope you enjoyed the episode. If you are enjoying the podcast, if some of this material resonates with you and you would like to make a difference and make sure that this keeps coming out in the world once a week, ongoing, there are a couple things you could do to show your appreciation. The first would be to go to iTunes and rate and review the show. That really helps us be found by new listeners when you review the show on iTunes. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/iTunes. The other thing I want to invite you to consider is becoming a Patreon. For a small monthly pledge, you get some benefits. So for $2 a month, you get advance access to every single episode. For $5 a month, you get a chapter of my upcoming new book. And for $10 a month, I host quarterly get to know you and question and answer chats over the web, and you get invited to that. I would love to have your membership in that, become part of the Better Sex family. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/Patreon, which is Patreon. Again, thanks for listening. I'm glad you're here. Feel free to comment, ask questions, get in touch. I'd love to hear from listeners. Thanks.